Welcome to Ageless by Rescu. This podcast is devoted to exploring the science of rejuvenation, uncovering the most trusted experts, the must-have products, innovations, and technology in the field of vitality, aesthetics, new beauty, and cosmetic enhancement. Well, I'm so excited when I get to have a friend and a colleague and a modern muse that's close to my heart on the show. Justine Cullen and I go way back. I think we were in the beauty industry together. We've been together for at least 20 years, I want to say. Welcome to Ageless by Rescu. I'm so happy to have you.
Oh, thank you for having me here. This is fun. I'm already having a good time.
Yeah. Let's talk about your background in beauty, because honestly, if you don't know it, it's not worth knowing. There's a few of the goddesses of the beauty industry, and you're certainly one of them. Tell me about your career background, and more so, what did you feel really inspired you to look after yourself, and what did you think was just total hocus pocus?
Well, I mean, I was a beauty editor for a very long time. So I sort of got into magazines knowing I wanted to be in magazines, but not really knowing what any of the jobs really were. And then I got into mags and I was like, saw the beauty editor, saw the lovely life that she got to lead, and the events she was going to, and the lovely packages that came in, and how everyone wanted to be her best friend because she ran the beauty cupboard. And I thought, that's for me. And it also, back then being a beauty editor was very much like the path to becoming an editor or an editor-in-chief. So for me, that it was a really obvious kind of a choice. And then I ended up being in beauty for about 14 years, which is a very long time.
But
I guess,
gosh, it's a great industry. It's science, it's beauty, it's travel, it's people, it's storytelling. I loved my beauty industry experience. It's like truly the great joy of my life, and I'm really proud of it.
Yeah, and look, and I think people underestimate, people thinking, oh, they just play with lip gloss all day. But actually, you are the person on a magazine, you're the person who's at the real coalface of advertisers, and that advertiser money coming in, and it's a lesson in client negotiations and client management, and representing the magazine. You're a marketer, you're a writer, you're a stylist, you kind of get a little bit of everything. So it's a highly valued role for me. And I talk about this in my book. I feel like I was a really bad beauty editor. Like
but you were known as the best beauty editor. So I like that, I like the self-concept and the reality are obviously divergent.
That's lovely to hear. But I loved writing about it. I loved it as an industry and the science of it, as you were saying, and I found it so interesting. But in terms of what I took into my own life, I was very much a sort of a case of, do as I say, not as I do. And I was always, and you would know this about me, I was never the girl who washed my face at the end of the day. Like, I never bothered.
Did you even go home at the end of the day? I don't remember Justine.
Not often. Not back then, no. But so, yes, it was, I was kind of like maybe the worst behaved beauty editor on the circuit in terms of, I would use any product. I never saw a product to the end, which is hard to do when you're a beauty editor anyway, because your job is to try everything. But I sort of never really, I never took it seriously enough. I took it seriously when I wrote it, but not for my own person. And it was only years later, probably the beginning of the pandemic for me, where I took all that knowledge that I had and that, you absorb by osmosis just from being in the industry, and really started to apply it. And God, I wish that I'd started earlier. I feel like now I'm taking care of my skin the way I should have taken care of my skin when I was in my 20s and 30s. But
do you think that because we were in the beauty industry and there's obviously such a lot of focus on rejuvenation, revitalization, the fountain of youth, we were peddling it and also constantly absorbing it, that it creates a certain anxiety in the people of the industry in, walking their talk and living up to the expectations of your readers or your followers now, as you would have. Was there ever a time in your life where you thought, oh God, like this is such a lot of constant reminder that you're never pretty enough, you're never the most beautiful, you're never the youngest. Did you ever have that anxiety? And you started young.
I did start young. I was sort of, I think, one of those people where I was always the youngest in the room. I was the ingenue. And then all of a sudden, it happens so quickly. You turn around and you're like, oh my God, I'm an elder statesman. Like, how did that happen? And I think for me, you know, that pressure I didn't really absorb a lot of that pressure until maybe, I think around 35. And the only reason that it started to dawn on me was because I was getting all these press releases and, you know, people would be pitching products, new products to us. And they would say it's for an older customer, you know, 30 plus. And I'd be thinking, in this industry, that's until very recently, that's as old as we go. That's as old as we talk to. So maybe the brands were selling products for an older woman, or their customer might have been an older woman, but they didn't market them that way. You know, 30, 35 plus maybe was as old as it went. And that also, you know, that held true for magazines. We would have in our portfolio of magazines at ACP Bauer, where I used to work, and you have, you know, I worked for Elle, and Elle was for a younger woman. So she was, you know, 23 to 28. But then, you know, Harper's Bazaar was for our older customer, 30 plus. And again, I'm like, 30 is so young. Like, that is not even a grown-up yet, now that I'm much older and I can see that. So, you know, that was the kind of time where I thought, wow, we're really perpetuating something here that is so out of touch with reality. And I think the industry is catching on.
Yeah, well, I think that there's been this huge backlash towards diversity. And when I did a survey for Ageless, funnily enough, which is why I titled the magazine and the podcast Ageless, was that age diversity, more than cultural ethnicity or any other diversity, was the most pressing desire for Australian women and readers to be represented in. And the thing that kept on coming back, and people would DM me and say, you know, I'm in my mid-40s, but I still feel 20. I'm 55. And, you know, why are they always talking to me about incontinence pads? I actually want to buy, you know, a bikini. I'm still living a life that's so energized, so revitalized. I don't see myself as that. And I think that that's where the dial has really shifted in the time that, you know, when we first joined the industry, and we were the babies back then to now. But, you know, as a media expert, as an editor, as an author, do you think that we have been part of the problem in fetishizing youth? And what do you think are the steps we've taken that have kind of woken up everyone to saying, hang on a second, like, really 40 is the new 20, like really the new 30?
Or just 40 is 40, but 40 is not what you've always thought it was. And yeah, I think I don't know if we were so much, I mean, yes, we were part of the problem, but by not putting up enough of a fight, I think. Not so much by actively perpetuating it ourselves, but by probably not even realizing that this was a culture that we were a part of, that we could have put more of a stand to. And I think that's part of a sort of, you know, that confirmation bias where, you know, even as, you know, in terms of putting people on the cover of magazines, there was always that sense that you had to be young and blonde and skinny. And it was only through my tenure at Elle, I think, that we were able to start pushing back on that. And that's purely because of social media, and people became much more demanding about what they, you know, saw and what they wanted. And it wasn't reliant so much on magazine copy sales, which still did tend to perform according to that confirmation bias. So, you know, I think for me, that idea, you know, nothing frustrates me more than when someone says, like, I'm 45, like, you know, oh, you look so great for 45. I never would have thought that.
It's such a
diff. What 45 looks like this is what my friends look like. This is what every 45-year-old I know looks like. And what are you seeing when you think of 45? And look, I get it. When I was 23, I remember thinking that a 30-year-old was ancient, and I guess that's always going to be the case. But we're smarter than that now. We know that that's not the case. And I love that representation is happening more. I love that there are people in their 50s, the Gwyneth Paltrows of the world, who, you know, really kind of make you go, this is what it's about. You know, that is what a 50-year-old looks like. I think there was that beautiful cover of WSJ Mag recently that Lachlan Bailey shot, that was Shalom Harlow and Carolyn Murphy and Amber Valletta, and they're having so much fun and they're on bikes, and they're not trying to look young, being muttony.
Yeah.
They're just who that's just what women in their late 40s look like. So I think we've worked it out, or we're getting there.
And you've had, you've got a large family, and you've had your babies at different stages of your career and different stages of your life. Can you tell me, has that kind of changed? What part of you has done things better, and what part of you do you think, having your first son when you were a lot younger was beneficial for?
Oh, look, there is a big difference between having a baby at 27 and having one at 42. I can't even tell you.
Yeah, I love that life experience that you have, because there are so many 42-year-olds who want to have a baby, and they can have a baby. So, and also, 27-year-olds, but I'd love you, because I don't know anyone else who's done it in the way that you have. What were kind of some of the markers that you really remember and that you cherish and you kind of think, oh God, never again, from each of the pregnancies and births?
Well, having my children, it wasn't young. It's not young statistically to have your first child at 27, but in my 36, world, it was very young.
Never have occurred to me to have had a baby at 27. Like, I just wasn't mentally at all ready for it. So,
well, I probably wasn't either, to be honest. But I was there doing it, and I ended up having two under 30. And, all of my friends were still, partying every night. And, I was living in Elizabeth Bay, and I would, I'd go and have dinner with them with a baby, just kind of like in a sling, and have dinner at Hugo's Pizza. And then they'd all go on to like have a huge night, and I'd go home to change nappies or whatever. So, that sort of adjustment was really interesting, but I don't regret having children at that age at all, because I think there's something really lovely about having that energy and being able to keep up and just, staying young. I don't feel like an older parent now with my youngest two, but I definitely have less energy. I'm more tired. My older two boys complain all the time that I don't parent the younger ones enough, because, I had more energy to be stricter with them. I read to them a lot more. I still do that, but not as much. You have more time. I think it was good from a career perspective, because I'd sort of, at that point, I'd done enough to have established myself, particularly in beauty, but not enough that I was at the point where it was really hard to jump off for a while. So I was able to kind of keep working at a pace that was comfortable, and my career could take off after that point. All the success that I had in my career really came after I had children. So,
and why do you think that? Do you think that you shifted in your confidence, in your ability to handle multiple things? What changed in you?
I feel like I felt internally like I then had something to prove. Like, we do work in this industry of permanent youth, and this idea that all your, there are 23-year-old creatives changing the world all the time. And so for me, it was like, I'm not ready to be a daggy old mum who's like put out to pasture. Like, I don't want to go and be put on a pregnancy magazine or whatever it is that you want me to do. It made me much more sort of ambitious and wanting to prove myself. And I did probably feel more confident in my ideas. And I think it does open up your world a little bit. So, for me, that was where I felt the most creative and the most capable. And also, it's just true that parenting is an amazing primer for business success, because you are amazing at multitasking. You don't want to get in and waste half the day like chatting to your colleagues. You want to get in and smash it out and go home. Like, I do really believe, like, if you want something done well and quickly, hire a mother.
I think so too. And I think that the other thing that you learn is you learn the depths of all of your strengths and weaknesses and your boundaries, and you have to really work on your triggers all the time when you're a parent. And so that training of like biting your tongue and prioritizing differently is a great business skill as well. I agree with you. I loved your wedding pictures on Instagram, and I remember looking at you thinking, she is like Peter Pan. She's like forever young. It was so cool. It was beautiful. Tell me about the background to your wedding plan. And then, I think you were pregnant too, right?
Yeah, I was really pregnant.
Yeah, really pregnant. You were on a roadie in America. Tell me about it, because it really, to me, embodies who you are as the person I know, truly ageless. You've really circled back and found, the version of yourself that is, peak Justine. And I just loved that moment, because I felt really happy for you. I felt like you were the most you actualized when I saw your wedding photos.
Absolutely. And that is hands down the best thing about aging. Yes, it comes with saggy knees and weird hairs.
I just had threads for my saggy.
Don't expect. But you do know who you are and what you want, and you're comfortable voicing that. And yes, so for us, we were going on a road trip around America with our family. We decided that we wanted to elope somewhere along the way. And for me, I'm a real control freak. So, I had been married before. It was the big wedding with all the detail and the extravaganza. And for me, this wedding was just like everything that I really wanted. And I knew that it was the right thing to do, because I was letting go of so much that I wouldn't normally. We literally picked the spot that was just super convenient for our mothers getting there and getting home. We found a really great chapel and just took the date that was available. I was pregnant. I wasn't pregnant when I bought the dress. I kept it. It didn't suit me, but I kept it because I thought it would be great if I was pregnant. And it worked. So I had this great Chloe dress that just hung in my wardrobe in the hope that I would be pregnant. I got a blow dry 2 days before we went to America from Renya, and just was careful not to squish it too much. Like, I didn't get my hair done on the day. It's all so unlike who I was before. A makeup artist that came recommended from someone I had never met before, but who was incredible and is still a friend to this day. So, it was all just however it was going to happen, but it didn't matter because it was this perfect moment.
It was the surrender. That's what you'd learn.
Absolutely. And surrender's not something that comes naturally to me at all in any other area of my life, but that felt right.
Tell me why you wrote your book, Semi-Gloss. Like everyone was eagerly anticipating it, but tell me why you felt the need to write a book, and what you think are the highlights of writing the book, and what are your favorite parts of the book?
I hadn't intended.
Have you got the cover there? I want to hold it up if you have it.
Just sitting next to me all the time.
Yeah.
Just casual flying here. Yeah, so I hadn't intended to write that particular book. I had intended to write a book of sort of pop culture essays, and as you or anyone who knows me knows, that's kind of, my head is always full of kind of what's next and politics.
Which is what's made you a formidable editor. Yeah.
I like to combine it all, and I had this idea of writing a book that would sort of look at the times that we were living in, and obviously, first person and sort of interspersed with my experience, but much less intimate and personal than the book ended up being. But I have said, many times that I was pregnant when I was writing the book, and I had just started a new job in a whole new industry, and I just didn't have the mental capacity for that book and the research that would be required. And so instead, I found myself getting more and more personal. And I was also at this crossroads in my life where, I'd just gone through some big changes in my home life. I had got divorced and remarried. I was having this baby. I'd left a job I'd been in for 25 years. And it became a sort of cathartic analysis of sort of, I think this is something that happens to women in their 40s, what had been and where I was going. And so it became just sort of slowly more and more memoir-like, and the publishers would call it a memoir. And I'd be like, it's not a memoir. So then they started referring to it as my not memoir. And it's as part of that process of it becoming more and more personal, I think I really came to the realization that for it to mean anything to anyone, for it to have any kind of impact, that I had to put it all on the table, and I had to show myself warts and all. That if women would relate to it in any way, they had to see the ugly moments and the mistakes and all of those things alongside, where I'd come out the other side of things. And I'm so glad that I did that, because the best part about the book has been the aftermath of being able to have this direct contact with all of these incredible women who've written to me and told me their own stories or told me they related to something. And I have had, you know, like my DMs are full of people's secrets and women's, you know, the things that they can't tell their best friends or their mothers. And it's been a really powerful experience for me to go from thinking, oh God, I don't want to write a personal story. No one wants to read another one of those, to, okay, there's a real point to this. This is like, you can help someone, or you can allow someone to feel seen through another person's story. And yes, that's been the incredible part of it.
One of the things I really love about you is you always share the journey and the success of your best friends, and you run in a pretty successful crowd. Can you tell me about your relationships with women and the women that really inspire you, and what kind of conversations do you have about, you know, personal development? What kind of conversations do you have around beauty? What kind of conversations do you have around relationships and, you know, who you want to grow into?
I love my girlfriends deeply. I wasn't someone who, like, I'm not friends with anyone still from school, for example. You know, I never thought in high school that I'd found my people. And a lot of mine came from those years as a beauty editor. You know, some of my best friends, Bronwyn McCann, for example, Zoe Foster Blake, you know, a lot of those women who are still such an important part of my life. And those were my
tight industry. I mean, when we weren't competitive with each other, we were all like tight friends. We traveled in a pack, we partied in a pack, we mothered in a pack. So I agree with you.
Yeah.
It's actually, everyone kind of dismisses the magazine or the publishing industry as bitching competitive, but it isn't.
Yeah.
It's super collegiate.
Absolutely. And I don't think I realized how much that was the case until I left. And, you know, I'm in a much more corporate world now. And I realized that people aren't all like that. You know, we, in magazines, I think everyone was so aware that one minute someone could be your colleague and the next minute they could be your boss. And also, you have very defined lanes. A beauty editor is not competing with a fashion editor for the same job. So you can all be friendly. No one's going to get promoted into a completely different department. So there's something that's really, you know, there's enough lipstick samples to go around, for example. You know, no one's having to fight for their piece of the pie. And also, I mean, how much of an arsehole would you have to be if you can't be nice when you're living a life that's essentially, you know, you're being shipped around together to beautiful restaurants and given these wonderful experiences, or you know, trips to meet you know, skincare experts around the world, or, you know, visit factories. Like, there are some such incredible things that happen in that world. So I think you have to be, you know, a naturally pretty friendly person. Like, it's an easy place to be nice. You know, for me, those friendships really, they blossom because you're spending so much time together and you're like-minded people. So it's like the first time in my life that I'd met people who were like me, you know, where I felt really understood.
So we're talking about, as I said, some really successful friends and relationships, and, you know, everyone's gone their own different path. We all kind of, certainly that cohort that you spoke of started together in the beauty industry. And I guess, you know, we've read about Zoe's amazing success with the Go-To skincare brand. And, you know, what does it feel like? First of all, I'm sure everyone wants to know, what is it like to actually be Zoe Foster Blake's BFF? And
Isn't everybody Zoe's BFF?
But also, what does it feel like, and what are the conversations that you're having in your inner circle as you're rising and falling and going sideways in your career, in your relationships? Because I think it's really nice to model what it feels like to be a group of powerful, beautiful, successful women, mothers, business women, so that we can start having those conversations with our friends. I know that I have cut out any friendship that doesn't include real talk. Like, I want to share all of me in a conversation. I want to share my vulnerability. I want to share my ambition. I want to share my darkest secrets, and I want to share my most fanciful dream. And if I can't do that with you, we're not really growing together. And so I'd like to hear from you with, you know, this stellar sorority of best friends. What are some of the things that, you know, you think you can do to really instigate that shift in the relationships that you have in your lives?
Well, I think all those reasons that you just spoke about are the reasons why it makes new friendships as a grown-up so hard to foster, because a lot of that stuff comes naturally just from time and history and knowing you.
And trust.
Love that I can speak to my girlfriends absolutely in absolute shorthand, and they can reference something that happened. If I'm thinking of a path or a decision, and then they can reference something that happened 10 years ago that maybe I've forgotten. And it becomes, this shorthand for life and advice without necessarily having to get deep all the time. Because, the other thing that happens as you get older and businesses grow and more children are born is that you have less and less time to foster those really worthy relationships. And so sometimes I might only communicate with, my best friends via memes. We might just send each other memes for 3 days because we're all busy and we don't have time. But we know what that means, and we know, like I've got one of my very closest friends, Cherie Comerford, who's brilliant in every way, but she's just recently moved a little bit further away than she's ever been before. And I swear to God, we can go weeks, and the only communication that we have is sending each other people we don't like or are laughing at on Instagram, which sounds really bitchy.
You have a burn book relationship.
But it's literally just people, something that we love, and it's literally reduced to that. But that doesn't mean that the friendship is reduced. It's literally that this is our coping mechanism for now, while we've both got crazy stuff going on and we're homeschooling or we're doing all of these things. This is how we're keeping that little kind of the red thread that connects people who love each other, that I really believe in. And, it stretches and it gets knotty, but it doesn't break. And this is how we're keeping that red thread alive for now. And then we'll go back to our normal stage of talking to each other every day on the phone or being able to see each other more often. But I think that's where the history of a long-term friendship, that's the glory of it, because you can go through those phases, you can be as busy as you need, but it's still as nourishing as it's ever been.
And don't you feel that when you have those old friendships that have stood the test of time, you almost are bonsai'd as to the time where you first met? So you interact with each other in such a youthful, fun, manner. I know that with my best friends, like it takes one song, my best friend Olivia and Darren, and it takes one Madonna song, and we could literally be in the middle of writing a business plan or talking about something horrific, and the wiggle comes on and we're dancing on a couch and like we're doing something crazy. And I love that, again, as you said, about the frame of reference, the touch points that are unspoken, And
that idea, I think that idea of agelessness comes into play there, because you can be with those old friends. And we had this the other day. We were sitting in a restaurant. I was like, "Did we come here for your hens?" And we realized we were talking about something that happened 15 years ago. But it feels like yesterday. So in that sense, you get that idea that sort of all the time and none of the time has passed. And there is an agelessness to that, I think.
Definitely. And, you can't manufacture that. And new friends are wonderful, but it's really hard to manufacture that. I want to talk about your travel and your experience as an editor and a beauty editor. And as you said, the beauty editor often had the most power because it was the most lucrative part of the income for a magazine. It was the most glamorous job. Fashion is different to beauty. And I want to talk about the people that you've met in your journey, because there is an enormous privilege of meeting inspirational people, and also there's a tragedy of meeting people who you were fascinated with or put on a pedestal, and then you meet them and it's like, whoa, not so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, and I think that's part of the reason why I never liked to, as the editor-in-chief, I never liked to write my own cover stories unless I was super, super convinced that the person would be great, because I could never fake it enough. I could never fake that gushiness that you need in a cover story. And so often those people were really disappointing in real life, or you just wouldn't be able to break through, and they were just less impressive or less charismatic than you imagined. And, there's real truth to not meeting your heroes, I think.
I definitely know that from experience, and it's always devastating when they kind of break the...
Absolutely. Yeah. But then you have other people, I tell a story in my book about a cover that we shot with Elle McPherson once. And it was with her ex-husband, Gilles Ben-Simon, which would be, can you imagine the pressure of shooting with your ex-husband? She was married to him when she was in her early 20s. You know, he was already much older and much more successful, and really played a huge role in her career going forward. And I can't imagine how intimidating that must have been in itself. But he wanted to shoot on a boat in Sydney out past the Heads. And so we were all like, oh yeah, you know, we're Australians, we'll all be great. And he was like, well, it could get rough. And we were like, I'm not going to fake the French accent, but we were like, okay, well, we'll be fine. And we all get out there, and just one by one, everyone on my team starts vomiting, and just relentless vomiting. We were so seasick. And we were using the bathroom so much that eventually the skipper was just like standing in front of the toilet saying, no one's allowed to vomit in the toilet anymore. And poor Rachel Wayman, who's my fashion director at the time, she just grabbed him and she was like, you will not let me vomit in front of Gilles Ben-Simon. And the wonderful thing about Elle in that moment was that she was also sick, but she was just such a trooper. So he was the only person not vomiting. She had vomited a little bit, but she would just pose, look incredible, and then just very discreetly pop her head over the side and come back. And that was such a mark of, you know, what a workhorse, what an incredible work ethic. There was so much elegance to it despite the weird situation. It was really, you know, it's those moments where you're like, oh, that's why you're where you are. You know, that's how you've done this, because, you know, that's the person that you are. So pleasantly surprised by that experience. And then in so many other cases, so underwhelmed by many others.
What about the beauty tips and things that you've made your own? I mean, I know that I'm sure everyone asked you this, but you've been exposed to absolutely every trend, every innovation. You've had laboratory tours, I'm sure, like I have. And sometimes it's electric. You really are in the presence of a great mind or a great product, and you can really feel it. What are the things that you have now added to your own kit and you are passionate about and excited about?
So, I mean, I still evolve my routine all the time. I do love a gentle retinol product because, you know, there is some stuff that just works, you know, that it works.
And I love Richard Parker so much. I mean, what a God.
Amazing.
How can you not be excited in his presence?
I think that, you know, and the other person who always really impressed me as a beauty editor, and this is going back years and years, was Daniel Mays, who was the research and development director at Estee Lauder for a long time. And he was very much like, you know, I remember him saying to me once, look, I don't want to have a tone. There's nothing that you need a toner for anymore, but I have to have them in there because there's a certain group of, you know, rich old women in New York who really love them. So they're going to stay in the range, but that's not where my head is at now. My head is in, and this was at the point, I think we might have even been having a meeting because it was the first time they'd used an AHA in a product. So we are talking a very long time ago. But, you know, I remember him saying to me, you know, the most damage that you can do to your skin is by over cleansing. It's like everybody's over cleansing right now. And he's like, you know, and that's so damaging. And I probably took that a little too seriously, which is why I always went to bed with my makeup on. But, you know, I think that idea of kind of being gentle with your skin, using ingredients that work in formulations that you know are effective and packaging that you know is effective. I think that you know, my philosophy on skincare is kind of pretty simple, and it's also very sensorial. Like,
right,
for me, I like a ritual. I want to feel, I mean, yes, I've got products that might sting a little and products that don't smell that sexy because they're super clinical, but actually I do like that feeling of, you know, inhaling a beautiful skin oil before I put it on and doing the massage and, you know, really getting all the toxins moving through the lymphatic system and all of those kinds of things. So I think that part of it for me almost means more than the efficacy of a product sometimes.
Do you go to a skin doctor? Do you have clinical facials? Would you consider surgery?
I will always in life, in any area, consider anything. I'm not silly enough to think that you should ever close a door off to anything. Yes, look, I love a clinical facial. I don't get enough time to do them. It's like you know, if I've got time to go out and get something done, it's got to be something that is necessary for the front facing part of my body, i.e. it's enough that I got my nails done, you know.
Yeah.
You know, I'm squeezing things in here and there, but, you know, that's something that I would love to do more. I've been having Botox for a very long time. I'm due. You can probably tell that. God, I mean, I was so scared to start making appointments again once we were allowed.
Did you get social anxiety? Yeah.
I was late to everything. I get my masseters done, which is a very important thing for me because I'm a crazy grinder. So, you know, I basically, you know, the second that wears off, I'm back to like grinding again and insane headaches and migraines. So that's been really impactful for me in terms of procedures.
Have you had any of the lasers, the BBLs, any fat sculpting treatments post-pregnancy?
No, but I'm super into the idea.
We were talking before about, you know, we've been stalking the surgeons in the US about mini facelifts. You know, every time I have the conversation with a celebrity or, you know, one of the modern muses, I always say, you know, would you consider surgery? Because surgery's changed so much. And like you said, you'd be mad not to consider everything unless you have an ethical problem with it. But what are you excited about in the science of beauty and agelessness? Is it ingestible beauty? Is it topical? Is it surgery? Is it biohacking? What do you think is kind of the frontier of aging well, living well, having the best energy, the best sex of your life? We need to talk.
I mean, I think
as well,
all of those things, but I think especially how we've moved into the area of supplements and our understanding of supplements and what they can do, I think, you know, has been a dramatic shift. And, you know, I know the jury is still sort of out on ingestibles. I still take them because to me, it makes sense. So I'm going to do it until you tell me that it doesn't work. It doesn't hurt. They taste pretty good. I'm happy with it. But definitely in terms of supplements and being able to tap into what is it that I'm feeling depleted in, or where do I think that I can improve something? Like at the moment, you know, I'm feeling pretty good in most ways, but I'm taking lots of magnesium because like I'm just getting old. My body's just starting to seize up all the time unexpectedly. But I think that there are all sorts of things where, you know, our knowledge is just evolving all the time. And I love that in some ways supplements have become sexy. You know, I think that's great.
Have you ever had genetic testing, or do you get blood works done to determine what you need?
I mean, I've had my bloods done. I had a wonderful naturopath, David Javan, who is in Randwick in Sydney, and he's really great and helped me like lose a lot of weight post. Actually, it was before I fell pregnant the first time. It wasn't that I wanted to lose a lot of weight. It was that I was feeling kind of a bit sluggish and not myself, and I didn't have a lot of energy. And he wanted to get me back to a place of, you know, real health before I fell pregnant. And he did an amazing job. I would love the time to see him more. But I forgot what the question was.
Have you had genetic testing?
Oh yeah. And no, I haven't had any genetic testing. My son, my 14-year-old on his 12th birthday, was desperate for 23andMe, which I thought was one of the cutest things in the world.
Did you get it done?
He got it, yeah.
Yeah, Lily.
Like now you're in the database and you can never commit a murder.
I know, right? They've got everything. And it's pretty bad for your insurance because they've got your blueprint. But I found the most illuminating guideline for actually.
Did you get that one or a different one?
I got 23andMe. I did it 8 years ago when they were still giving you the full breakdown.
The health.
Yeah.
Knowing that they don't do the health now.
Yeah, because people were jumping off cliffs and killing themselves if they were like predisposed. There was a lot of information. Whereas I found it a really sober, honest, scientific guideline to then take to my naturopath and to take to my hormone doctor and to take to my, you know, whoever I was seeing in allied health and say, I've got a predisposition to this, or I'm really strong with this, but my epigenetics and my lifestyle could potentially put me at risk. What can we do? And it saved me so much money. And I have been able to navigate past so much bullshit in this industry because I know what my DNA code is.
Yeah.
So I'm a massive fan of DNA testing.
Yeah, I'm like, it's definitely something that I'd be so interested in. And maybe even not the DNA stuff, but what's that other one where they do all your bloods and
Microbiome testing and
yes,
yeah,
all of
hormone
that.
testing.
Fascinating. It's incredible what
It's
we can know about our bodies now.
I know. So I'm just going to wrap up, my love, with a little bit of experience that you've had and some of the thoughts that you've had. What do you think is the most important aspect of reimagining yourself for the future? Do you think it's something that we need to consciously make space and time for? And do you have any kind of well-being practices or self-actualization things that you do or you've learned?
No, but I think the most important part of staying young and staying yourself as you get older is probably just to be aware of that. Like I think a lot of the aging that happens is so subconscious, or even unconscious. Like we let ourselves become old before we're really aware of it. And I think there's really something, the most youthful people I know, it's got nothing to do with what they look like or, how they dress or anything. It's really about their awareness. And are you staying open-minded? I think that's the biggest thing. Are you open to generational shifts? Are you open to recognizing that people are different? Are you open to changing the way we're changing the way we think about things, our values as a society? I think being able to be part of, or at least cognizant of, all of those changing tides and shifting sands is probably the thing that keeps you the youngest. And I mean, for me, having teenagers is what does that. There are times when I think I'm a super evolved person, but I'll say something, maybe I'll look at one of my niece's Instagram photos and freak out at what she's wearing or something. And my 16-year-old would look at me and be like, you can't think things like that, mum. And I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. Each to their own, so I think for me, that's the biggest part of it. Trying not to become a cliche of your generation or getting stuck in your ways in any way. That's the most important part for me.
Who inspires you? Who do you think does that really well?
Look, I'm not necessarily a groupie, although I think it's an excellent business. But I think for me, like Gwyneth is one of those people. Like she's just open. And I love that idea of like, maybe some of the stuff she's into is a bit cuckoo. Some of it's completely valid, but she's not closing herself off to any idea. And I think that's, I think that's a real, I mean, of course there are issues around her and the privilege with which she approaches things. I understand all that, but I think there's really something in that idea of just being like, we don't know everything. I can't know everything. I might be 45 and think I know everything sometimes, but I don't.
And I think on the subject of privilege, it's still who she is. So she can only be herself. She can't pretend to be something she's not. And what you were saying earlier, I think is the ultimate truth is know yourself, be true to yourself, but be open because you haven't stopped. You haven't stopped at 20. I was interviewing someone for the magazine and they were in a career where you really stop when you hit your peak, which is in your 20s. And I thought, gosh, that's such a weird concept because, I spent most of my life trying to be older because I was very overqualified for my youth. And I remember one of my mentors is John McGrath, the real estate expert and guru. And I worked for him when I was quite young. I was 23 when I worked for him. And he opened up the most incredible doors for me. I attended crazy meetings like with Rupert Murdoch, with massive property developers, and he would send me along by myself. And I said to him once, I said, it's amazing. You really trust me. You always let me have a go at things. And he said, Bahar, if you're good enough, you're old enough. So I spent all of my youth trying to pretend to be older, look older. And then to get the perspective of someone finishing their career in their mid-20s because of the industry that they're in and having the conundrum of having to reinvent themselves for relevance for the next 75 years. It's interesting.
Isn't that like one of the wonderful things about the world we're living in today is that I don't think age demographics are really a thing anymore. You have 50-year-olds killing it on TikTok and you've got 21-year-olds buying luxury products like it's going out of style and they're just all one. And I think it's just now so much more about, like,
Psychographics.
are you interesting? Are you relevant? Are you, are you keeping things fresh and staying on top of trends? And your ability to understand tech becomes more and more important. So I think that leaves us in a world that's so much more open in so many ways, where you no longer have to feel like you are redundant because you've hit 40 or 50, 60, whatever that is. You can still be anything that you want.
Definitely. I'm going to wrap it up by asking you, do you still have another book in you? Because you didn't have the time or the headspace to do all the research, but there's got to be that book in you still.
I feel like I wrote a screenplay last year, and I feel like that's maybe my happy writing space. So I feel like everyone wrote a screenplay during COVID, but I was also one of those people. I'm always creating. I'm always, my mind's always ticking over with things. If I could sit down, writing a book's really hard. I will just say that.
I wrote a book too, and it was devastating. Yeah. I nearly had a nervous breakdown.
We've spoken about that before. Like, there's nothing fun in that process. Anyone who does it, when I look at, like Zoe's prolific, when I look at, authors who have just had a career just relentlessly putting out new books, I think, wow, you are incredible, because that's hard work and lonely work.
The reason that you found it so draining, and I definitely found it devastatingly draining, is how much of yourself you put in it, because there is nothing more permanent and cathartic. And like, as you said, you put it all out on the table as writing a book. And so, yeah, it's different to anything else. I've had lots of businesses, I've launched lots of things, I've created all sorts of media, but nothing was as personal as a book.
Yeah, it's also incredibly gratifying, I think, to you have this tangible thing in your hands that people understand, and that's wonderful. It almost becomes a time capsule, I think, of where you are at a certain time. I don't know how I'll feel about it in 5 or 10 years, but it's great to have now.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I could speak to you for hours. There's so much experience and wisdom and fun, and honestly, anyone who's ever met you, one of the the first thing that they always say about you is that you're beautiful, like genetically blessed.
She was really drunk.
The other thing that they always say about you is she is fun, and you are fun, and you are forever young, forever in your early 20s to me. And it's such a pleasure to have had you on the show. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. That was an absolute ball.
Well, have a great day. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please share and rate this episode. I'd love that.